What's up? I know, guys. I'm sorry. I know that we normally do the fly-ins today, but I had mentioned last week when we were doing our top 20 countdown that we would be talking about the FAA thing today, and I don't want to postpone the fly-in for an entire month. So I just wanted to, postpone it by a week. We're going to do the fly in next week instead of today. And today we're just going to have a normal show where I'm not talking about the top 20 planes and I'm not talking about contests and giveaways and all that fun stuff. Today we're going to talk about horrible, boring things. So, before we do all that terrible stuff, let's give a good shout out to all of the fine, fine folks. We got Mike SSI, hello, sir. Nate Kugel, Nasty Nate in the house. George Watts, Liam O'Neill, Victor RC Jet, JCB 67, Shadowwops RC, Reed Smith, Plains Archery and Table Tennis, Mr. Michael Reitza. I just got here. Ken Sprouse, we got a lot of the usual suspects, and folks are coming in. Folks are coming in. Sorry about if the video's a little grainy tonight. I'm on my webcam tonight. I probably could switch it up, but there's there's stuff on the other side of the camera that you guys aren't allowed to see. Can't show you yet. Adam Hampton, welcome to the show. If you haven't been here before, thanks for stopping by. So, hey, I hope that everybody had a great New Year's a few days ago. The new year for me has been pretty freaking crazy. On like the day before New Year's Eve, I got some kind of bad news. I mean, not super bad. Some of you guys know this, and some of you guys don't. But it was kind of an interesting chain of events that happened last Wednesday. So I had applied for a product manager job at Motion RC and had made it fairly deep into the interview process. And ultimately, they went with another candidate, so that was kind of a letdown. And I got that news on Wednesday of last week. So, I was a little bummed. And then right after that, I got the news that Horizon was sending me some super top secret stuff to review. So then I was pumped. Because had I ended up getting that job with Motion RC, I wouldn't be able to continue the channel, I don't think. So that ended up falling through. But the good news is that I still get to maintain my relationships with BitGo and with Horizon. And like 20-30 minutes after I got the bad news that I didn't get the position at Motion, I got the word that I'm getting some cool stuff from Horizon to review. That showed up on Saturday, so I've got some super top secret squirrel stuff like right over there, and that's where the nice camera's pointing. So I can't show you all that stuff, but stay tuned. I will be on a special Thursday edition of the Pilot Ryan Media show. We're going to be going live this Thursday with myself, Pilot Ryan, and a special guest. So be sure to tune in for that. I think we're going to go live around 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So, about 30 minutes after I got the news that Horizon was sending me some super special top secret squirrel stuff to review, I got the word that I did get a different job, uh, which takes me back to, kind of what I did when I first left, my job with the government and working with the Navy. I came back to Atlanta and was working as the vice president of technology for a surveillance company. And I did get a job, as the lead engineer of another surveillance company here in Atlanta. And I just started that job today. So I just got home not too long ago. I'm pretty worn out, but I had contemplated saying, like, man, I'll just skip this show because I'm dog tired. But I can't quit you guys, man. Can't do it. So lots of great things all happened on December 30th. It was like bam, bam, bam. Like crappy news, good news, great news. So everything is freaking cool. We're not gonna lose our house. I get to keep the YouTube channel. We get to keep plugging away on new products from BitGo. So we're going to be seeing some new Dynam planes here soon. We're going to be seeing some new products from Horizon here soon. And I can't wait to share that stuff with you guys and keep this channel going. And, I've got like a new, I don't know, like a new energy really. And I haven't been this motivated to really get going since July, and you guys that have been around for a while, y'all know what happened back then, and I've just been in a funk ever since. So, all these good things that are all happening just one after the other is really what I needed to kind of help me get motivated again, man. And sorry for the like internal pep talk. So thank you guys. Thank all of you. I'm super happy, and I'm relieved. Relieved is the best word that I can think of, man. It's been a rough 2020, and to kick 2021 off right, just all feels right with the world. So everything is good, man. Everything is good. So, yep, today was the start of that new job. I went there, everything is going good. And, because I came from that world and kind of took like a 1 year hiatus, thanks 2020. I was able to just jump right back into it, and tomorrow I'll be doing some testing and kind of QA type stuff on some new product that the surveillance company is deploying. And then on Wednesday, I'll be out in the field, supervising some technicians. So, it's good to be able to just jump right into it, not have to do, a bunch of training and get ramped up in a slow way. I like that I can just jump right in and get busy on day one. That's Daryl, how you doing? Barry Campbell, David Snyder, Jackson RC Aviation. How you doing tonight, my friend? Jeff Tui, how you doing? Gordon Dole, good to see you. Victor Shamulus, good to see you. Hey, sorry about your F-22, man. Happens to the best of us, dude. Hey, for what it's worth, you give it a hell of a licking, man. You put it in good. I mean, if you're gonna wreck them good, right? Yeah, Jeff in Lower Alabama, I've had that problem with Real Flight 9.5. Never had that issue with like 8, Real Flight 9, even dating back to like Real Flight 7, 7.5, 8, and Real Flight 9. Never had any issues with the updates, but Real Flight 9.5, for whatever reason, um, I found that if it's for whatever reason not working right, just reinstall it. Use the installation files, reinstall Real Flight 9.5, and everything will start working again. I've had to do that twice now since the update to Real Flight 9.5. No idea why. Airvec's cool, man. Yeah, it's it's the thin stripes on the shirt. It's even crazy to look at it when in person. It's got like these crazy stripes that are horizontal and they're only maybe like 5 millimeters apart. Um, so looking at the shirt, it looks pretty crazy. Dang, George Watts, thank you so much, man. So, I mean, I'm gonna tell the good folks. I'm gonna tell the good folks. So we just had an awesome, you know, secret super chat. We'll call it a super duper chat from Mr. George Watts for $100, y'all. What an awesome man. Thank you so much, George, for the support that you've given us all throughout, 2020 and since the start of this channel, man. I really appreciate it. Victor, I I would have, because it's what they say, man. If you find a job doing something that you love, you'll never work again a day in your life. Um, and regardless of what the pay would have been, I think that I would have been very happy in a position like that where, where I get to do something really special uh, with and for the community that I've grown to love so much. It's the ultimate way of giving back, to be able to work at one of these companies and really make an impact. Yeah, man, that would have been awesome. So, you know, it's certainly not the end of the world, and we're going to continue to do great things here. Shadow Ops, yes. I will be on with Pilot Ryan. Speaking of Pilot Ryan, speak of the devil, there he is. Um, I will be on with Pilot Ryan this Thursday, 7 o'clock p.m., for a very special episode of the RC Pilots Lounge. And Ryan and I will be on discussing some things. You know what happens on these very special Thursday episodes. And we're going to have a very special guest join us as well. So that'll be a lot of fun. Be sure to tune in for that very special Thursday episode, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the Pilot Ryan Media YouTube channel. So, you guys ready to talk about the boring stuff? Jeff in Lower Alabama. Yeah. Everything I've got to show off on Thursday, I've already unboxed. By the time the show happens, everyone's gonna know. We're just gonna talk about it. All right. So, yeah, exactly. Ken Sprouse. So, listen, we're going to talk about the FAA's remote ID final ruling a little bit. And, you know, the reason that I didn't do the fly in today, um, last Monday is when the ruling came out, right? And it came out about an hour before I went live. I mean, there's no way that I was going to be able to read and digest 470 freaking pages stuff about remote ID. So I've spent the last week going over the documents, you know, looking at everything, trying to make sense of it. You know, what is it? How do I interpret it? I've watched uh, a couple of different live streams from a couple of different folks, and what's interesting is that there's, even though the documents are there, I mean, it's there for us to read. There seems to be a lot that is somehow open to debate or left open to interpretation, and I don't think that the that final ruling, if you read through that document, there's there's not a lot to debate. There's not a lot that's that's left black and white. You know, the requirements are set in stone, man. What I think may confuse some people, we're going to address that here in a little bit. You know, the parts that may be confusing, and the other parts that are still in somewhat of a limbo territory, we're going to discuss that as well. So, first off, yeah, we got to vote for it before we read it, right? I mean, that's how it works. Michael Nowland, welcome to the show. Thanks for stopping by tonight. I appreciate it. So, Joseph Ramsey, how you doing? Good to see you tonight. So, you know, the three deals with the FAA, right? You're either going to fly a plane that's got remote ID that it came with it from the factory. You're going to fly your plane with remote ID that you put on as an add-on module, or you're going to fly your plane in an FAA recognized, you know, whatever, I area. FAA recognized um, something area. I forget what the I stands for. Go sue me, you know, whatever. I didn't write the stupid rule. So that's it. I mean, that's the rule. Remote ID is coming. You know, we can complain about it, we can do whatever, right? What what has been missed by a lot of people is exactly what that means. And we're going to get to that in a little bit. But first off, I want to talk about some important milestones, some important dates. Now, the important dates are right now, the final ruling has been put into the Federal Register and it will stay there for 60 days and it will not become a promulgated document, meaning it won't go into effect for 60 days. Following the 60-day period where it sits in the Federal Registry, 18 months afterwards, that is when manufacturers have to comply with the new stuff. And also on that 18th month the after the 60-day kind of cooling period, so we're talking 20 months from now, basically 19 months and 3 weeks. So in 20 months, that is also when the FAA will open up the application process for organizations and schools to start applying for their facility to become an FRIA or a FRIA, right? Now, what that means for us the hobbyist is at this point, there is no remote ID that is required for us to fly. The rule is out there. In 60 days, we still don't have to comply with that. In 20 months from now, we still don't have to comply with that. We, the pilots, are not required to comply with it for another 12 months beyond the 18-month period. So, the AMA sites and organizational sites, what they're calling community-based organizations or CBOs, and they're going to have an application process to become a CBO as well. There's a lot of convoluted stuff that's in there. A community-based organization and basically educational facilities are going to be allowed to apply to have their site recognized as a FAA starting in 20 months. My guess is that once they get all that approved, it's up to us, and also manufacturers have to build planes that are remote ID capable starting in 20 months. So every plane that comes out after February of, 20 months from today, so almost 2 years from now, every plane released after that must have, like, if it's a manufactured plane ready to go out of the box, it must be remote ID capable, right? So it will have a serial number associated with it along with the remote ID equipment, and it will be ready to start transmitting remote ID data right out of the box. So all the models that we enjoy today that are over 250 grams are going to need to be remote ID capable and able to be registered under our FAA registration. Now, the 30-month window, that's when we have to start complying, right? And that's where those 3 sets of rules come. You're either flying a plane that's got remote ID built in, or you're flying a plane that has a module that you added to it. Michael Nowlin, thank you for becoming a member and supporting the channel. I appreciate it. And EQ, that's funny. So, or the third option is fly at a FAA, and there's even a fourth option: fly aircraft that are less than 250 grams. Aircraft that are less than 250 grams are exempt, and there are also a couple of other cases where you will be exempt. But for the most part, it's not going to apply to any of us that are, just standard hobbyist enthusiasts. So, understanding what the rules are and kind of those timelines, first, we're talking 30 months from now. So 2.5 years before we ever have to comply. So we're talking deep into 2022. So it's nothing that we're going to need to worry about this year, or what is it? It's 2021. So all of 2021, all of 22, so deep into 2023. So 2.5 years from now, like June of 2023 is when we're going to have to start worrying about, oh goodness, am I compliant with remote ID? Right? And I see a lot of people complaining. And I get it, the man, whatever. Now, what I want to do, and I know that some folks are going to be like, "Well, Dave's just playing devil's advocate," but I'm not. This really isn't that bad, guys. Assuming that the FAA UAS registration, that they keep that cost at $5. for all the planes that we already own, my understanding is that the registration that we get for a remote ID device, and we're not even going to talk about what the device is yet, but the registration number that's associated with a device that is an add-on module that we can put in any plane that we have today, that gets registered to our FAA ID, right? So we can take that module, which, if we step back and we look at what the requirements are that were set, because there's a lot of things that were removed too. They removed the Wi-Fi capability, or the Wi-Fi. There's no transmission over Wi-Fi, right? They're not going to require any kind of transmission over the internet at all, which means that the remote ID unit is simply going to be an over-the-air broadcast, just like a VTX in an FPV system, only not as powerful. So, the requirements for that have not been defined yet, but the suggestion from the FAA is that it's going to need to be something that can be transmitted via either like a Wi-Fi signal or a Bluetooth signal. Now, not Wi-Fi connected to the internet, just Wi-Fi that's able to be received, like an ad hoc, 2.4 gigahertz broadcast. Well, at least I believe that's what it said. But the point is that it's not mega long range transmission. So they can it has to have Bluetooth, or not Bluetooth, it has to have GPS, right? Because it has to know what your position is. It needs to know your latitude, longitude, speed, altitude, and all of that can be derived from a GPS module. It's going to give you real-time speed. It's going to give you real-time, not necessarily real-time heading. If they do a GPS unit with a magnetometer, a compass, if they do a GPS module like that, we're still talking a very lightweight module on top of some kind of transmission device. And I think that some people are under the impression that this remote ID is some kind of, it's going to be broadcasting like their name or something like that. And it's not. It is totally not going to be broadcasting your name or even anything to do with the airplane that it's in. It's only going to be broadcasting a serial number for the device, and the FAA can take that serial number and plug it into a database and pull up who that serial number belongs, right? Because it's registered under your name, but it's not going to be actually transmitting any sensitive data. So it's really not that big a deal. It's like a little bitty baby transponder that you would find in any other airplane. And because of the requirement to not have it be, internet enabled, that it's only got to be broadcast capable. And at this point, it doesn't even define what the range of the broadcast needs to be. Does it even have to reach cell towers? Or does it just have to be in the immediate area? Is it an omnidirectional transmission? So even if all it's got is a little antenna nub, these transmissions are something that are not going to be blocked by foam. So, you can have this remote ID device tucked away in the back of the airplane, and there was something else like it must be able to interrupt the operation of the aircraft until it's transmitting and has like a GPS fix, right? So, I mean, there's ways to incorporate this thing. I imagine that with the size of current GPS modules, that we're probably going to find a way because of this, that this will lend its way to new innovation. That because of this, they'll find a way to make the GPS modules even smaller. They're going to incorporate that into some kind of device that's going to sit between the airplane and the ESC. So if it's hooked up right, it prevents the operation of the airplane, or somehow interrupt the power circuit where the plug in your battery, the remote ID gets powered up, and once it is able to achieve a GPS fix or whatever, then it passes power onto the airplane and energizes everything, and hopefully it has some kind of, I would build something into it where even if it's lost, that if altitude or whatever is lost, that it would maintain a shunt, like a connection, to the power system to allow you to safely land the plane in the event that the remote ID, transmission failed in flight. I mean, it would suck if the plane or drone or whatever you're flying happened to fall out of the sky just because, the GPS module stopped working. But here's where I see the innovation. And the one company that I think is going to be able to do this probably better than anybody, and they're probably doing it already, and where I think that it's going to offer even more benefits than what we see already from their technology, and that's Spectrum. I know that there's other great radio companies out there that have to be jumping on this, but the reason that I think that Spectrum is going to come out with, this is pure speculation, guys. I am not like, Nostradamus and reading the future. I'm just offering my opinion on what I think the possibilities could be moving into the future. What I would do if I was Spectrum, I would find because all E-flite planes, all Horizon planes, must have remote ID in them starting 20 months from now. With that being the case, I see there being a change to the way that Horizon sells airplanes, where there's no longer going to be a plug and play model. They will all be bind and fly, including Hangar 9. So your hobby zone, your E-flights, your Hangar 9s, blades, they're all going to be plug-in bind and fly models. And the reason that I think that is that Spectrum, they've already got the smart technology that runs through serial protocol. Anybody that knows how these GPS modules work, they also run on serial protocol. Horizon already has a GPS module, runs on serial protocol. Horizon already has the smart telemetry, that's full range telemetry that runs over 2.4 gigahertz already. So the transmission radio, the RF generation capability, the RF transmission capability is already built in. The only thing that they have to do is program it to transmit at whatever frequency remote ID demands. It has to be able to transmit a packet of information that's got your RFID serial number and the plane's altitude, speed, whatever, GPS coordinates. And the reason that I think that Spectrum would be really smart to include this is that right now they have the AR637T that has a built-in altimeter. I believe the 8360 and the 6610 also have a built-in altimeter. With remote ID, because they have to put a GPS module in there, I think that we're going to start, in addition to feeding the transmission of that data packet, they could also use that same GPS signal to send that telemetry back to the radio, where now we get full GPS telemetry. So now we're getting all the GPS data, we're getting speeds, we're getting altitudes, we're getting heading data. We're getting all of that stuff sent back to the transmitter. Here's why I think that's cool. You know, I know personally, I've known people that have crashed planes and not been able to find them. Wouldn't it be cool to look down at your radio and be able to see what the last GPS coordinates were of the plane before it went down? I know that's crappy, right? But what's up, Randy? So I think that opens up a window of opportunity for Spectrum to up the game again with their smart capable, the smart capable remote ID would have a GPS module built into them, or it could be, well, see, you get into this weird thing of can it really be separate? Because it has to be built in to every airplane that is manufactured after 20 months from last week. So here's the other thing that I think is going to happen. The only other types of airplanes that can be, if some manufacturer ships me an airplane that is mostly assembled, it has to have remote ID. But if they ship me a kit, even if they put together a package of stuff and I have to put it all together myself, it's now considered a home-built airplane. Even though I didn't fabricate all the stuff, that's another part of the FAA ruling. So I think they leave the door open to manufacturers like HSD, Free Wing, Flightline, Arrows, some of these companies that don't necessarily have full-on electronics packages. They wouldn't be able to implement the way that Horizon can. They're either going to have to find a way to do it. Like Free Wing and Flightline could probably implement it into like their blue box. HSD could implement it into their multifunction controller. FMS could implement it in like their reflex units, where every airplane is going to be required to have some kind of central, things, something like a blue box, something like that multifunction controller, something like a reflex module or a 8. That's where these remote ID things are going to be implemented. And in those cases, you can just plug a standard receiver in there, because I would assume that they're going to have flight controllers built into them as well. Anyway, the reason I bring all this up, guys, is I don't think that the future of this hobby is anywhere near as grim as they have first thought when that ruling came out last month. It looked bad. It looked bad for us. It looked bad for hobbyists. Like, man, they're really screwing us to the wall. But as I read through it more and I'm, interpreting and understanding exactly what the intent of the remote ID rule is, I get it. I've flown full scale. I understand the need for transponder, things like. Do I think that putting a transponder on a RC airplane with 1500 millimeter wingspan is a little bit ridiculous? Yes, I do. But, at the same time, I get it. And because these devices are going to be required to be open source, while open source projects are certainly, there is certainly profit to be made from open source projects, but, and I pray that I am right. I think that most.
Playing from Damned 02.
Sorry. This stupid lady. I think that my train of thought just totally went out the window because, the Amazon. Oh. So, speaking of Amazon, their robot was just talking to me. So I think that while this whole process was certainly brought about by the likes of our Amazons and UPSs and FedExes and these big companies that want to use their drones in the national airspace. I think if that had never happened, this would have never happened to us. And what I was going to say is my hope is that because of the open source nature of remote ID as a requirement by the FAA, that it will be open source, that everybody will have access to the technology. Can't patent it, right? That if you come up with this, they're going to share it with the whole world how you did it. So it's required to be open source, which means that I hope that some of these companies that claim to be these big ambassadors for the hobby, like Horizon, if the Horizon and Spectrum developers come out with a hardware device, I hope that they either suck up the price by losing a little bit of profit, the $10, $15, $20 that it costs to manufacture this thing, that they would absorb that, because we, the hobbyists, didn't ask for this, and if they use it as a method to make profit, we all lose. And I think that if we can continue to play by the rules, even though we think we're losing freedoms, and I get it, I know that there's a lot of patriots, me being one of them, man. Look, I served in the military. I spent 20 years playing around with submarines. I'm as big a patriot as anybody, and I hate the idea of, rights getting infringed upon. But the fact is, I mean, there's just being honest and realistic. There's nothing in the Bill of Rights, nothing that says we have the right to fly an airplane. We have the absolute right. Is it a freedom that we have? Yes, but it's certainly not a right. Our rights aren't being trampled on. Except maybe my pursuit of happiness. But I think that our ability to play by the rules is not going to be impeded on that much, and I really hope, for the sake of the hobby, that the manufacturers of this equipment step up and take a little bit of hit across the board to be able to do this and do it right, where we as hobbyists can continue to enjoy the hobby, and the only impact to you is that we got to give the FAA $5 every 3 years, right? Because I don't think that's going to change. And you have this inconvenience of having to register your remote ID device to your FAA ID. And that's it. Now, something else that I think would be kind of neat is in the event, because it's got a serial number, it's not like the squawk code of an airplane. You know, when I go and I squawk, I set up my a transponder on a full scale airplane to squawk whatever code the tower gives me while I'm getting my ground clearance. They tell me to squawk whatever. I can change that. Because the ID of your remote ID is fixed and it's tied to your FAA registration, I hope that they, it's if it's a requirement, it's very loosely followed. But I think that it's ridiculous that they ask us to put our FAA ID on our planes. And if I'm transmitting it via remote ID anyway, give me a break. Like give us that. Make it where I don't have to put that stupid crap on my plane anymore. Yeah, I mean, look, it's not really going to be a problem. I think that anybody, number one, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. Big manufacturers that we all know and love today, they're going to play by the rules because they don't want to get in trouble. So our free wings and our flight lines and our E-flights and our Hangar 9s and our, FMSs and HSDs and Aeros RC and Dynams, these companies have to play by the rules. If they want to sell their planes in America, you got to jump on board. Otherwise, I think that they could be subjected to some pretty hefty fines, which has nothing to do with us flying the plane. It has to do with them selling them. Yeah, they may not be able to enforce us flying the plane, but they can absolutely enforce the manufacturers to comply or pay some ridiculously hefty fines. So I think that we're going to end up getting remote ID in the planes that we buy 20 months from now, whether we want to comply with it or not. And I'm pretty sure that these manufacturers, they're smart enough. They know how to design and engineer airplanes. They're going to design around this remote ID device, whatever it ends up being, and it's all going to be fine. As far as like drag, and I mean, I really doubt when I look at what the requirement is, I really doubt that anybody that makes a remote ID device that this thing is going to weigh more than maybe a couple of grams. Probably 10 grams at the most. And if 10 grams is going to shift your CG and adversely affect the flight performance of your airplane, you've got other problems. Oh, Reckham Roy, that's not true. Remote ID is going to be the manufacturer's problem long before it becomes our problem. Like I was saying at the beginning of the stream, the manufacturers have to comply with remote ID standards in 20 months. 20 months from last Monday. We don't have to comply with remote ID standards. Like, we don't have to have remote ID to fly according to the FAA. Whether you do it or not is completely up to you. If you want to be an outlaw, I mean, who am I to stop you? But we don't have to comply for 30 months from last month. That is when the rule goes into effect for the hobbyist, the pilot. But the manufacturers have to comply in 20 months from last. So, like I was saying, it's the manufacturer's problem long before it's our problem. Yeah, I mean, e-powered RC, dude, I get it. Uh, the clubs in 20 months, and our club included, and whoever is the president, and really, I hope that the AMA as an organization steps up and does this for us. The clubs are going to need to first be recognized as a community-based organization, which I don't think is going to be a big hurdle to jump over. And then, the clubs have to apply to become FAA recognized whatever area, ID area. So if all AMA fields fall under that category, or at least the AMA fields that applied for it, and they stay in good standing, they can reapply every 4 years and get it updated. I think for those of us that fly at FAA fields or at AMA fields that have been adopted into this, FRIA status, we're all going to be fine. And if any of us are going to be upset over this, it's not really the AMA guy, those of us that fly at AMA field. It's guys like Reckham Roy and GB and John VHRC that are not flying from an AMA field. Guys like Kenny, who doesn't fly in an AMA field. Guys like man, for whatever reason, the name escapes me right now, but it's the guy that flies out of Southern California. He flies like an SU-30, like every day off the beat. Who's that guy? Dave's RC. Dave's RC is another, great example. In the tube deep. Those are the guys that I'm worried about, man. Those are the guys that are going to get screwed by this. And if my intuition is correct, and that all the models that come out in 20 months, as long as you're flying a newer model, already got remote ID in it. It has to by law. It's just ridiculous. But it has to by law. It's going to have remote ID in it. So all we have to do as the hobbyists, and I know nobody likes to give their money away, but as long as the FAA keeps it at $5, it's only going to cost you $5 to get your FAA registration. You register your remote ID to your FAA registration, and that's it. And I think I've seen some stuff about us having to pass some kind of rudimentary testing. I don't I don't know if that was in this remote ID final ruling or not, or if that's hidden in the depths of some other regulation that they've approved. Um, I haven't been asked to take any tests yet to be able to fly, you know, to fly my stuff. Right, so that's correct. It's one remote ID module. You can have one remote ID module that you can move between planes. So if you've got, like right now, say you have 40 airplanes that don't have remote ID and they were built before remote ID was a requirement, you can still comply with remote ID by buying one of those modules. You throw it in the plane, and you're good to go. BitGo Hobby, what's up? Hey man, I think that some of us probably will go rogue. But I've also seen where Bobby flies. I mean, and I think for some of his Dynam planes, that's not an AMA field, but when he's out doing, I mean, some of these videos that he does are at an AMA field. And look, I hope for those of us that decide that we're going to go rogue and that we're going to come, we're going to become RC outlaws, which is funny. I hope nothing bad does happen to you. I mean, right now, what what's the repercussion? What's the consequence for flying without it? You know, I didn't see anywhere in there where there was a clear cut fine that was defined into all of this. Like if you break the rules, it's going to cost you this much money. Yeah, exactly. Who is they? Is they the police? I mean, they're talking about working with, local and state law enforcement to enforce, yeah, the remote ID final rule. But what are they going to enforce? So here's the other thing that I think is pretty interesting. What if I have a device in my airplane and the cop asks me, hey, are you flying remote ID? And I say, yes, I am. And I land the plane and I've got a circuit board, like a little piece of breadboard that I glued a bunch of bullcrap to. Like I just soldered some fake components to a board, that that I cut up myself, and I ran some dummy wires to the back of the plane, and I'm like, there's my remote ID unit right there, dude. How are they gonna know if it's real or not? No, they don't have to deal with us flying a plane. Now, I do think that there will be repercussions to be faced if you do something stupid and the police get called on you and you get caught doing something dumb. Like if you are, say you're out in the middle of a parking lot and you're flying your Avanti in a parking lot, and instead of running into the Flex Innovations van, it runs into some soccer mom's SUV and busts the window out on top of her child. Far-fetched as that may seem, that guy would get busted and be the first person to ever get in trouble for not having remote ID in it. The rest of us who aren't doing anything that would be considered illegal or aggravated, we're going to be fine. Are they going to enforce it? I don't know. Can they? I don't know. What I do know is that at least for now, and it still has yet to be seen, how much is a remote ID unit going to cost? How big is it going to be? What's it going to weigh? I have to speculate just based on the current GPS mod transmission devices like a VTX. For a VTX is an incredible transmission device and can work miles away. Albeit on 5.8 gigahertz, but I would assume that at the frequencies that they want these things to transmit at the power consumption levels that they want, that I think we're going to be able to do this with a very small sized component at low cost and low power. Not going to affect it. Is it going to affect our flight time? Yes. Is it going to be noticeable by the pilot? Probably not. We're talking like maybe a few seconds. Like my remote ID cut my flight time by 2 seconds. No one's going to notice that. It probably draws less power to run that GPS than an afterburner tank. So like one of Ray's afterburners or Chris Wolf, or it doesn't matter where you get your afterburner from. Your afterburner is going to pull more power than a GPS mod, and nothing. Yeah, same here, Jeff. And maybe that's why. And look, it's not lost on me that I may not be as critical about what's going on, because there is a degree of comfort that I have just knowing that I fly at an AMA field. I don't have to worry about it probably ever. I can fly whatever I want there, whenever I want, because it's already going to be an FAA recognized identification area. It's going to be one of these free as long as the club puts in the applications and follows the rules. I'm sure it'll get approved, and we'll be fine. And that's what I'm saying. The people that I'm pissed for, people that I hope that this ends up not being as bad as it looks, and that my intuition comes true, are the folks like John VHRC, like GB Linden, like Dave Zark, Kenny, like so many of us in the tube deep, like so many of us that don't fly out of AMA field. Jeff, I think that would be fantastic. I think if they do enforce this, and and again, I keep going back to what I know is going to be true whether we want it to happen or not, that every plane put out by in 20 months, every plane put out by any major reputable manufacturer here in the United States is going to be remote ID capable. So if you buy a new plane in 20 months, it's going to have remote ID in it, dude. You didn't want it, you didn't ask for it. Maybe you try to pull it out, whatever. It's just going to happen. So, the only thing stopping you from being compliant is just being, unwilling, which is cool. Nothing wrong with being a rebel. Yeah, Love RC, that would be awesome. So, John VHRC, you know, something that I was thinking that would be pretty cool if you could get away with it is, you know, have the remote ID in your plane wrapped in a miniature Faraday cage so it can transmit a damn thing. I've got it in my plane. It ain't transmitting shit. So, Ken Sprouse, what I am seeing is that for the folks that build planes, so I mean, are balsa kits still going to be available? Of course. And the FAA doesn't have anything against those, but you still have to be compliant with remote ID, and that's why they're going to have these, you know, remote ID, you know, modular devices and put into a plane to make it remote ID compliant, even if it wasn't when you bought it. So basically, you know, the rule is anything over 250 grams, and we're talking 250 grams all up weight, right? That means that with battery and all fuel and everything else that is required to fly that plane, if it is more than 250 grams all up weight, it will be required to have remote ID. Whether it's built into the plane or it's a module that we add, the only exception being if we fly it at an AMA field. Eddie K, that's what I was saying at the beginning is I think that what we're going to find is here in the coming year, because like I was saying at the beginning of the show, if you missed it, the manufacturers have to be remote ID compliant in 20 months. 20 months from last Monday. In 20 months, the manufacturers are required to start manufacturing their planes with remote ID built in. Would make complete sense to me. And again, I'll kind of go over this because some people missed the very beginning. So if you're watching this on the replay, I'm going to say the same thing I said half an hour ago. I think that Spectrum is in an awesome position to be able to add a GPS device to their telemetry receivers. The telemetry receivers already have the transmission, the broadcast capability because they're transmitting telemetry data. They already have the altimeters. They've already got all of the metrics that remote ID is looking for. You add the GPS model, so now you've got your lat, your long. You can certainly program the thing to send out your FAA, remote ID serial number. It has everything that remote ID is looking for. I think they can do it while adding minimal size to the size of the receiver, and it makes all of their planes remote ID compliant at that 20-month window. Even though these new receivers just came out, now with this remote ID requirement, it just makes sense. And they can use that GPS not just to send out remote ID data, but to also send back additional telemetry all built into the receiver. So, receiver already gives us battery temperatures, motor RPM, battery cell voltages, full flight pack voltage, current sensing. I mean, there's other things there too. If you're running a smart ESC and a smart receiver, you're getting and a smart battery. That adds a few more metrics to or a few more sensors to the telemetry data that's coming back to the airplane. But why not have it do the same thing where that telemetry data, I think, is getting broadcast at a specific rate. I can't remember exactly what it is. I think it's got to be more than once a second, but it might be once a second. But they could certainly make it where the transmission for remote ID happens, alternates between here's a telemetry packet, here's a remote ID packet. Boom, 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 boom. So they just have to update the frequency that it transmits. And if it meets the requirements, I think the FAA is going to approve it. So there is some room for manufacturers that have really good engineering staff, like Spectrum does, to be able to not only provide us what we need in order to be remote ID compliant, but also add some additional to add value on top of. Like, hey, you got to be remote ID compliant anyway. We did it to these receivers. They are all now remote ID compliant. And in addition to everything that used to be able to do, now it can also tell you speed, it can tell you heading, it can tell you, it's already got an altimeter in the AR637T, so it can already say, tell like descent rates and climb rates. There's so much stuff so much more that can be derived by adding like a compass and a GPS mod to those things that make them even better than they are today, in my opinion. Maybe I'm full of poopy. And Kevin, uh, is that I'm gonna destroy your last name, and I apologize. Uh, Boris Larry. I don't know. I apologize, dude. I know I'm destroying that. So the Spectrum receivers are already um they're already proprietary. Unless you're running like a radio that's got a multi-protocol mod. None of these everybody that makes proprietary receivers, you're not I don't think that you would have to change the way that the receiver operates to be able to transmit remote ID signal, because it's just a blip. Just like a transponder in an airplane. It's just a blip, that tells the tower the the telemetry data of your airplane. How high are you? Where are you? How fast are you going? Etc. And it spits out a little code. That's all this is it's a little bitty baby transponder for an RC airplane. And truth be told, the transmission of these devices, unless they have some kind of remote ID relay station every mile, which I really doubt that's going to happen, the premises with which the remote ID broadcast is going to be able to get picked up might only be a mile or two. But, maybe their methodology, maybe their way of thinking is if a full-scale airplane can be warned of the presence of a remote control airplane, then we're all better off for it. Now, if it only sees the presence of that remote control airplane, 5 seconds before it hits it, things could still get bad. John VHRC, my understanding is that every remote ID device, right, so what goes in the actual airplane, they are all going to have unique, like a GUID, or like a MAC address on a computer network card. And we register that MAC address under our FAA ID, which we're all supposed to have. I mean, I know all of us don't, but we're all supposed to have this FAA ID that says, hey, I paid the FAA $5, and now I'm, registered with the FAA as a UAS pilot, or an unmanned aircraft pilot. And you take the serial number of your remote ID device and you register it against your FAA registration. And once you do that, I think are good. I think you're now compliant. I think in the grand scheme of things, this is pretty small beans in the coffer of the FAA. If they get $5 from every pilot, how much money do they really make at our expense? The DMV in my state makes more money than selling people driver's licenses should be free. But, what can you do? It's just one of those things where you either decide to live dangerously or you decide you want to live by the rules. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that following the rules is not going to be quite as horrible as we think. Might not be all that. Kenny, it's cool. I actually said good things about you a little bit ago, but now I'm done. So now I can say F you, Kenny. Right. Look, I think we're gonna be all right, guys. I think the people that decide, hey, screw it, I'm not doing remote ID. I mean, more power to you, man. Keep flying. Don't buy any airplanes after, the 20-month window from last Monday, because every airplane you buy after that is probably going to have remote ID built in. If it's sold by any of the reputable manufacturers here, they're all going to have remote ID. I got to think that the most popular manufacturers sold in the United States are absolutely going to have. E-Flight will have remote ID built in 20 months. Freewing and Flightline, they will have remote ID built in 20 months. So I hope Alpha got the memo because apparently it takes a couple of years to make a plane. Whatever he's designing right now, he needs to figure out a way to shove remote ID up in there. Robert Ortlove, that's cool, and I really wish that the United States had some kind of program like that, but we don't. You know, the truth is, and I think that anybody that flies in an FAA, or not FAA, but anybody who's got an AMA membership, I think we all know what we're paying for. We're not paying to fly at any kind of certain club. We're paying for an insurance policy. Yeah. Um, so, Mike, I think you're right. Yeah, AMA fields, we're most likely going to be exempt from having to comply with remote ID. So again, if you fly in an AMA field, most likely you have nothing to worry about. Um, yeah, exactly. It's secondary insurance. If you don't have any insurance, then they might kick in if they deem that your that your accident fits their insurance requirement. Um, so Mike Keller, I think that I had mentioned it before, and I've just got so many like random thoughts going through my head that I know that this whole conversation tonight is almost kind of half whacked out. Um, like I'm really tired, so I'm trying to speak coherently and sound halfway intelligent on the subject. I, I think in order to maintain some complicity with the rule sets and the way that the remote ID final rule is written, and it's not, there may still be changes yet to come. Yeah, Barry Campbell, that's a good question. What are the penalties? And yes, Mike, the field must be a FRIA, FAA recognized identification area, and they have to apply for it, for that FRIA status starting in 20 months from last month. Now, I have to think that these companies that currently do plug and play airplanes, if they want to be able to sell an airplane without putting any kind of remote ID, I think that it's on them. They are required to sell it now as a kit where you buy the parts, so you can buy like the airframe and you have to buy all the other components separate. Because I think if they give you all of the stuff in the kit to fly it, that is considered a full airplane, and it would need to have remote ID. There's still that's where there's still some gray area. But if it, and even if you build it, so even if you did buy it a kit and you bought say an airframe and you B track, your receiver and your servos, motor, your ESC, all of that was separate. I think that it'd still be required to have remote ID. It would just be permitted to use the module instead of it needing to be built in. there's still some vague elements that, but I think that it's pretty, for every part in there that's vague, there are other parts that are pretty clear. Um, and again, it's one of those things where I'm just reporting. I didn't make the shit up. Oh yeah, absolutely, GB. I think we're all going to keep doing it. And I think the standards are they're in the standards are not in the document. The design specifications. So at the beginning of any good software development life cycle, you start with an idea and kind of move on from there. And I think that framework, that idea, was put together pretty well in the final ruling by the FAA, and the companies that go down the path of trying to make a remote ID device are, I mean, they have to comply with the 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 specifications, the minimum specifications that the FAA has published in the ruling. Uh, Josh A, I haven't heard anything about the FAA trying to ban glow fuel. I haven't heard anything, but, and this is just my opinion, some people love glow. Some people love the smell of it. Some people, love the sound of a glow motor. I don't personally. I think that at this point in our career, when almost, or our career, at this point in the history of this hobby, almost every motor is either gas or can be converted to gas. And whether it runs as efficient or not, the fact remains that a gas motor is far cheaper to operate than a glow motor. And it is the way it is. Uh, David Martin Graff, I mean, you get an extra channel. If you want to know what makes an NX10 worth the extra $50, the inclusion of Wi-Fi, so you get automatic updates without having to go and download something and put it on an SD card and update it that way. I mean, that holds value. That all the model templates and everything are already there. And anytime you do get an update, it comes with an updated list of model templates that are new to flying and don't know how to set up the radio yet. They can apply, template X, and it's just going to make it ready to go. DX9 has them, but you have to put it in there yourself. The NX10 does have Hall effect gimbals, where the DX9 does not. The DX9 is still using potentiometer style gimbals, so over time they will wear out. and NX10 has ball bearing Hall effect gimbals, and the Hall effect gimbals, it's just a magnet going over a solid state sensor. There's no moving parts there, so I mean the Hall effect sensor is going to last, and there's one more channel, and historically Spectrum radios have sold for between 40 and $50 a channel. So with all of that being taken into consideration, I think that the NX8 is probably the best value. Not cheapest, I'm saying it's the best value, but I think the NX10 is right in line with where it should have been price wise, at about $40 to $50 more than the NX or the DX9. Hmm. Hey, Ken Sprouse. I mean, we've got some of the, let's call them the legacy crowd that that fly at our field. We've still got quite a few of the old guys, the seniors that come to our club that are still flying FM. Old Futaba and uh, Sanwa radios with the big analog, you know, volt meters on them or watt meters, so you can see. Actually, I think it's a battery gauge. When you turn it on, it goes to wherever the battery is. David Martin Graff, I gotta be honest, man. I think that if what you're describing is an option that works for you and you're not living without for too long, I don't think that swapping, that returning the DX9 and pre ordering an NX10 and waiting for a couple of weeks, I don't think that's a bad move. Um, just my opinion. I don't think that's necessarily a bad move. Oh, well, so I'd love to keep it going, but I'm opening my eyes just long enough to be able to read the to read comments, and then I think I'm making coherent remarks about those comments. At least I hope I am, but my eyes just keep going shut because I'm so tired. So before I say more ridiculous things or start talking out of my butt, then I probably need to get off here. I know, GB, they would, man. And yes, Kenny, I did. So thanks for reminding me. Um, I'm not as peppy as I was in the beginning of the show. An hour and a half has taken all of the life out of me, man. So, listen, guys, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight, and uh, I hope that I was able to maybe inform some folks what is going on with this remote ID thing, or I just fired you up even more, and now you're more pissed off about it than you were last Monday. Um, but I think we're gonna live through it, guys. I think it's gonna be okay. I um, I got faith. I've got faith in the manufacturers. I've got faith in, you know, in all of us, that at the end of the day, when all of this, rolls out and we're all, remote ID compliant, I bet you there had to have been some guys that bought cars years and years ago, back in what, 96? Or was it 2002, when tire pressure sensor monitors became required on all vehicles manufactured in the United States? And I do remember people pitching a fit about it. I'm not putting those stupid sensors in my car. I don't need that crap. That's going to throw my wheels off balance. it's it's going to happen, man. TPMS sensors came, and now they're in every car in the world, and they work great, and there was nothing really to worry about. And I think that I think that's probably what we're going to run into with this remote ID thing too. That we're all, it's much ado about nothing. That it's going to end up being this tiny little thing that just gets stuck in a corner somewhere, and you know, who cares? It's a little device I have to have in my plane. And the same way that you have to have a receiver in your plane, you're going to have remote ID. Pick it up at the top and go. Unless you don't live in the United States, and then you can forget all this crap. Mickey B, I'm glad you were able to make it. I am unfortunately not going to make it. My eyelids are getting heavy. So I'm going to call it a night, fellas. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and hanging out with us. Next week, be sure to tune in, because we are postponing the fly-in tonight. We're going to be moving that to next week instead of tonight. It's been a week since the remote ID thing came out. I think it's one of those topics that if I don't talk about it, I'm doing a disservice. Talking about it probably did a disservice. I hate bringing up like the sensitive topic, make people mad, but it needs to be talked about, man. So the fly-in that happens on the first Monday of every month didn't happen this Monday. The FAA ruined it, by the truckers. Next week we'll be doing the fly-in, and we'll still have the Harrier, or not Harrier, the hover competition. $25 Horizon Hobby gift certificate on the line, plus any PayPal donations that we get next Monday get added to the prize pool in a winner take all format. So guys that want to participate in the real flight virtual fly-in next week, get your hover game ready, because that's what's happening next week on the RC Air Marshal YouTube channel. And also, guys, be sure to tune in this Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for a very special episode of the RC Pilots Lounge over on the Pilot Ryan Media YouTube channel, with special guest me and another special guest, and of course Pilot Ryan and probably Bobby too. So don't forget to check that out. And also, hey, I don't have pilotryanmedia.com, but in all of my recent videos, if you check the links in the description, I gotta say it, fella. The links are in the description. I've got a link that'll take you to BitGo Hobby and a link that'll take you to Horizon Hobby. If you use either one of those links, it offers a small commission to the channel, zero expense to you. So if I ever talk about an airplane, or if you're convinced that you want to buy something, I'd appreciate it if you use the links that I have in the description to buy those things. And also, we still have 30% off of all of the RC Air Marshal merch at our Teespring store. And if you use the code RCAM30 off, you will get a 30% off coupon when you check out from the Teespring store if you want to grab you some RC Air Marshal merch. And everything that you guys do to support the channel, we appreciate. We love you guys. And we will see you all next week. Everybody have a great night. And we will see you in about 45 minutes. Well, what time is it? Yeah, about 35 minutes over on the Gooniac 33 Fiery Booty YouTube channel. His live show starts in about 35 minutes. So all y'all be sure to check out Ray's show. And we'll see y'all next week. Y'all have a great night.